When it comes to fighting games with their rich histories of diverse and memorable characters, few if any share a history more elusive than Ingrid's. Heck, even her origins are somewhat shrouded in mystery when it comes to understanding who she even is. However, despite this, Ingrid has somehow managed to stay relevant through cancelled media and other obscure appearances to the point where she's even developed a small fanbase. She's a character that by all accounts shouldn't even exist and is even someone with a fairly controversial history, with her being created during one of the darkest periods Capcom faced, where they were starting to lose confidence in the Street Fighter brand with their mediocre fighting game releases. But just who is Ingrid? Well, that's kind of a complicated question. Her first appearance dates as far back as 2003 with the arcade title Capcom Fighting All-Stars. This game was said to be a crossover between Street Fighter, Final Fight and Rival Schools, with it also featuring some original characters, kinda like how it was with Marvel vs Capcom 2. But Ingrid didn't make her debut here, despite that being the plan. She was set to be showcased alongside 3 other new characters, DD, Rock and Evil, with the 4 of them being known as the Code Holders, with the group's story being them getting contacted by Mike Haggard to defuse an atomic bomb known as the Laughter Sun in Metro City, which I'm assuming is what the game's arcade mode was going to be centered on. Even as far back as Capcom Fighting All-Stars, Ingrid was characterized as being very mysterious among the other Code Holders. And even though this game never saw the light of day, what remained of Ingrid seems to be mostly kept the same when Capcom decided to convert her over to the fighting game that we got instead, that being the infamous Capcom Fighting Evolution. Due to negative feedback from playtesters, Capcom decided to scrap Fighting All-Stars and to instead rush out this game, which consisted of reusing 90% of assets from their other fighting titles. I mean, just look at this presentation, they couldn't even be bothered to properly crop in these character portraits. I won't beat what's a dead horse at this point, but if you know anything about Fighting Evolution, you'll know it's pretty bad, with it being one of the worst fighting games of all time. The title is pretty unbalanced as you'd expect with a release that shoehorns in mechanics and characters from other games that weren't supposed to interact with one another. The only new character for this game is Ingrid herself. She's positioned dead center in the selection screen, with her inclusion being the only interesting thing about Fighting Evolution. Her 3D model and moveset was converted into 2D, with it looking pretty much identical to how she would have played in Fighting All-Stars, which reminded me a bit of the development history of Mother 3. She fights with an unknown power which mostly resembles telekinesis. Her playstyle is mostly centered around punishing opponents, with her being able to exchange off counters and juggling them to start off combos. Fighting Evolution doesn't really have much of a story to its arcade mode, with Ingrid defeating Pyron and sacrificing her godly powers to stabilize the universe and then just disappearing, I guess. This game really is the definition of rushed. However, Ingrid would go on to appear in Street Fighter Alpha 3 Max on the PSP in 2006. Her appearance and moveset is pretty much the same as Fighting Evolution's, however this game would elaborate on who she actually is through its arcade mode, with her saving Ryu from submitting to the Satsui no Hado and then encountering Rose, who can't get a reading on who she is but attacks Ingrid after finding out that she's after M. Bison's psycho power, with Ingrid elaborating that she's the original owner of this power and that Bison was the one that stole it from her. At the end of Ingrid's arcade mode, she confronts Bison and wants to reclaim his psycho power that he stole from her, even mocking him for giving it a silly name, which confirms that Ingrid uses some form of psycho power to grant herself abilities. She then destroys Bison and his machine, claiming that no mere mortal can control this ability. Despite her short screen time, Ingrid seems to have some pretty strong plot relevance to the actual world of Street Fighter. In many ways, her very existence is nothing like the rest of the cast from this series, which are known for being more grounded characters, adopting real-world combat and being from actual countries. Whereas Ingrid, whose in-game title is known as the Eternal Goddess, coexists as a magical, reality-altering entity which somewhat contradicts the mythos that Street Fighter established for its tone. Because of Ingrid's retconned involvement in a remaster for Alpha 3, she was initially met with some controversy back in the day. Die-hard fans weren't keen on her depiction, seeing her as nothing more than a Mary Sue. I can sort of empathize with this, since yeah, I'm sure it was somewhat jarring to see a random character just appear in the series, power creeping both Ryu and Bison, two beloved fan favorites. It would be like if they remastered Ocarina of Time and made some random robot the true mastermind behind Ganondorf's scheme. Just complete tonal whiplash. But that's the thing with Ingrid, even though she's depicted as being this powerful all-knowing goddess, her personality and fighting style plays around with it, and I kind of like that about her. Her entire moveset is designed around toying with your opponent. Her idle animation displays this carefree energy, showing how this is just a game to Ingrid. Her personality is playful, with her wink quotes conveying how she's not really taking any of this seriously. At the time, Ingrid was the shortest and lightest Street Fighter character, which explains why all her moves feel floaty. Her counter-heavy playstyle along with her fast DP makes her moveset focus more around punishing your opponent rather than playing aggressively, which does complement her overseeing and playful personality. She's the kind of combatant that is never using her full power in a fight. Her visual design also reflects her otherworldly personality. With her blood eyes and more anime appearance, she looks more like a BlazBlue character than someone from the Street Fighter series. But the bizarre history of Ingrid doesn't just end here. In fact, Ingrid's controversial past continued on, and her legacy as a fighting game character seems to be somewhat cursed with how close she's been to being included in other titles but not quite making a cut for various reasons. She was originally supposed to be part of the roster for Tatsunoko vs Capcom but didn't make the cut to the game's final build, with this one image of her being the only evidence of her cancelled inclusion. Ingrid was also heavily considered to be added into Marvel vs Capcom 3 Ultimate, but unfortunately she didn't make the cut there as well. And oddly enough, whilst not being included in Street Fighter vs Tekken, she did make a strange cameo in the comic book for the game. Now this is obscure. Ingrid would also make various other cameo appearances across Capcom's games, further adding to her elusive past, with one of her more notable appearances being in Project Cross Zone 2 as an unlockable summon. And as to be expected in a crossover title like this one, some of her interactions with the other characters are pretty entertaining. But that still begs the question, is Ingrid a crossover character or does she actually originate from Street Fighter? Whilst this dilemma might be somewhat debatable due to her strange appearances and cancelled history, Capcom over time has acknowledged Ingrid as an actual Street Fighter character, with their reasoning behind this being since unlike Cody from Final Fight or the guest characters from rival schools, Ingrid doesn't have an actual origin game outside of Fighting Evolution, which isn't exactly a canonical title. This reasoning behind her inclusion among the rest of the world fighters, whilst a little polarizing, does make sense. Even back when Capcom Fighting All-Stars was in development, she was fighting alongside the likes of Ryu and other Street Fighter characters. And to further cement this connection, Ingrid also has an entry in the Street Fighter World Warrior Encyclopedia. So it would seem that Capcom is rather adamant on bringing her into this universe, despite what other players may think. And this of course brings us into the modern day with Street Fighter 6's Season 3 DLC. It would seem like Ingrid's design has had a major overhaul from her past appearances. Gone is the generic Cellular School getup, which has been exchanged for a more fitting cosmic attire consisting of what looks like a wingsuit and these strange earmuffs that remind me of Katamari. This new getup seems to be intentionally striking, with it fitting her more of a worldly personality, and despite the change I think it looks better over her more generic schoolgirl outfit. Her original colour palette of white and purple seems to have been mostly kept intact with her redesign. And on that topic, Ingrid's lore seems to have been mostly kept the same, with her being able to jump between worlds and even referring to herself as a code holder, referencing her original cancelled story from Fighting All-Stars. She's still mostly light-hearted and playful here, with these new monoid creatures being what she uses as a means of communicating between worlds. I mean, sure, why not? Capcom really does seem to be embracing Ingrid's tonal whiplash with how she doesn't really fit in with the rest of the Street Fighter world. Just look at Ingrid's critical attack animation. This is like nothing the series has seen before, and it stands out because of it. This is just so outlandish and I can't help but love it. On the topic of Ingrid's moveset, all of her previous attacks seem to be retained here, with them being given a visual makeup on top of Ingrid having more aerial juggles, which does further complement her more floaty playstyle. Funnily enough, Ingrid's monoid can also join in on the action, and from the looks of it can be tagged in, which kind of reminded me a bit of Jacko's playstyle from Guilty Gear. And this really just looks ridiculous. Once again, it's something completely different from what we're used to from these games. It's looking like overall that her playstyle will still be mostly centered around punishing aggressive plays and converting from them. But Capcom, like with Alex, has been adding in some new mechanics to help bring this character into the modern day. From her recently uploaded character guide, it looks like they're making Ingrid more of a zoner this time around. Also, for some reason, her battle theme known as Cosmic Scale Pretty is just straight up J-pop. It's good, but once again this is very much intentional tonal whiplash. When you think of Street Fighter 6's music, it's mostly hip-hop, rap, techno and jazz. J-pop, just like Ingrid, isn't the first thing that comes to mind when you think about this series. But I mean, that's the point. Capcom seems adamant on embracing the weird and wonderful of Ingrid's characterization and seems self-aware of it, with her inclusion here cementing Ingrid into the mythology of Street Fighter. She's a love or hate character for sure, but regardless of her reception, I have some respect for Capcom sticking with their guns and not changing Ingrid's lore or personality to appeal to some die-hard fans that didn't like her inclusion back in Alpha 3 Max. Even if in many ways she is the antithesis of Street Fighter. And personally, as a fan of this series, I much prefer when Capcom shakes things up with its roster. They tend to play things mostly safe with DLC inclusions like Akuma, Cigar and Bison, but I much prefer when they go in a different direction with original picks that might not resonate with some, but I feel like are much more interesting over another fan favourite Shodo being included. It's strange to think, but Ingrid's messy past as a fighting game character that almost never existed due to the title and group she originated from never seeing the light of day somehow fits in line with her characterization, almost as if this crazy origin story was planned since the beginning. Truth truly does influence fiction. And who knows, maybe in some crazy reality out there, the world did receive Capcom Fighting All-Stars and Tekken Cross Street Fighter. Maybe the Nintendo PlayStation existed and Marvel vs. Capcom 5 came out and it was actually good. But just like with Ingrid herself, these are all could be realities. I also have to give further props to Capcom to some degree for holding on to this character and not simply deleting her from existence. It's always nice to see when game developers are finally able to implement and realize characters or concepts eventually, even if they had to originally hold off or scrap them until the time is right. As a fan of Ingrid, it's nice to finally see her be realised in Street Fighter 6 and not just having her be shoehorned into a game that's just terrible or haphazardly implemented into a remaster. But with all that being said, what do you think of the reality observing Ingrid? Are you a fan, or do you hate Capcom for retconning her into the Street Fighter universe? Feel free to tell me about it in the comments. This character analysis was something a bit different from me, so I'd appreciate any feedback on what you thought of this video. Take care, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day.